welcome to the Mindset Michelle TV show. And we're so excited to have you be joining us again today. And today's extra special guest is the fabulous Sonya Walker. Hello, Sonya.
Hi, it's great to be here.
It's fabulous having you on the show. And for those of you that may not know Sonya as well and as dearly as I do, I'd love to give you a little bit of her background. She's an incredible technology transformation and leadership specialist who's worked for IBM, SAP, Oracle, across a wide range of very senior roles in that technology space. But she's an incredible human being, and she provides all sorts of insights and knowledge and know-how, not just in that corporate space, but also through her tireless work in the not-for-profit space as an NED, a non-executive director for people that I shouldn't have used the term, sorry, a non-executive director, and many other roles. And rather than hearing me talk about Sonya and the incredible work that she does, Sonya, can you please give the guests and the people watching the show today some little bit more insight about who you are and how you came to be the amazing person you are today?
Oh, thank you, Michelle. It's very kind. I'm quite humbled. Look, essentially, I started out, as we all do, committing to university, and so I went down the science path, and I did some really interesting things there. And one of my honours thesis was actually studying an endangered bird, if you can believe it.
Wow.
However, at that time, the .com industry for IT was emerging, and it was a really exciting era to enter IT. So it was like, do I go down mainstream science? Do I use my science and analytical skills to enter the IT industry? And I always had a passion for building business as well. So I became an entrepreneur and co-founded a consulting firm and several startup companies. It was an amazing time to be in the industry. And if you really worked hard and applied yourself, you could get ahead. The most successful company I sold on the book value of the company. And then I was setting up international IT vendors, NASDAQ vendors in Australia and Southeast Asia as they were going global. So that was quite amazing. And I was in my early 20s. I had never worked in an IT vendor. And one of my clients, Progress Software, the head of the region, said, would you love to come and work for us? And I guess from there, I entered the mainstream IT industry. And it was a really incredible time of high growth. But then .bomb happened. So we went through a global recession in our industry, and not many people have been through that. So that's where you start to, see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you think, how am I going to handle this? The industry was really quite dark at that time. And I've always believed in being innovative. When there's a challenge, look for a solution. So I decided I would get a scholarship and go and do my master's. What can I do to give myself the competitive advantage? And it's really tough to be in the IT industry. Sometimes you hit those high highs and low lows, and it's really important to remember what you've achieved that's positive, and then focus on what you can do to grow and develop your skills and capabilities. So I think from that perspective, I learned to be an MD at a very young age, and I always took that skill set with me. And when I had my first management consulting firm, I was really focused on what we now call, how you resonate with your clients. Because it was a smaller company, those clients that I resonated well with, I thought I'm always going to do great business with them. I've got trust and we can work together. And that's how I built those businesses. And those were some really valuable life lessons. Out of being an MD at such a young age, what I really embraced was that we're all just human. And it doesn't matter approaching an MD or a CFO or a CEO. My passion that I drove out of that was I really enjoy helping people be successful. And quite often when you're helping your clients, when they feel that you have their best interest at heart, and we now call it authenticity, but in those days that executive sort of term didn't exist. But if you're really behind them and supporting them and encouraging them and realising that when you're delivering a large transformation project or a big IT project, they've got their reputation on the line. And not just having the concept of what's important for them, it's also coaching them and being brave and saying, well, that doesn't necessarily work because this is my expertise in this area. And I think you go through the stages then when you think, oh, I'm confident enough in who I am to say, I recommend this, as opposed to say, have you thought about this? So you start to also grow in your own self-centeredness and your own confidence, and you begin to articulate in a different manner. Contemporarily, really we now have different capabilities and skills that they bring to leadership training, and some people also do what's called NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. There are lots of science now coming into leadership, which is really interesting, but it's about picking what resonates with you strongly and playing to your strengths. And I think that's something I've always believed in, and equally knowing what your weaknesses are, because that's a tough one. So
it is. I can really hear how in your journey the wonderful experiences that you had and the confidence that you gained through those very early years of and in very much the Wild West days of technology of being able to just give it a go, and if you worked hard you were able to get a lot of traction, and then you'll shift from there, and it is a very different beast to go from there into corporate world and everything. So I hear that evolution and that journey. And it's interesting when being a leader, being very self-sufficient and being an inspiration to many, and I know you also do mentoring as well as doing the not-for-profit board work. So out of this wide range of being an expert and a thought leader, and I loved how you exampled again, you go from saying, I think maybe, couching it in very, very generic language to, I'm an expert and I recommend this is what you should do and how you should do it. How do you think then, with all of that background, what is it that you would say success means to you? How do you measure success in your life with your family, in your life with your business? How do you then think success comes through?
There's a few different ways as a mum and as a corporate leader and as a wife. We've just gone through, and we're still going through COVID. So I've been homeschooling. I've got an immunocompromised son. So we're still homeschooling 2.25 years later. It's certainly been very challenging, but to me, it works strongly when I recognise that the reason I work so hard is for my family. And to me, that's inspirational. But in the early part of my career, because I didn't have children until later in my life, it was very focused on just having work-life balance and making sure. So I used to do a lot of sports. I used to do elite level equestrian, and those sports were also contributing to sports psychology and contemporary leadership mindset. So I think make sure that balance exists, whatever it is for you as a person, that you don't just, and of course I've always believed in give back. So I've been working in not-for-profit sector for over 20 years. And even when you touched on the mentoring, it's such an honour and privilege to mentor. Most recently, it was a group of millennials and some women in IT as well, specifically to give them ideas and share that knowledge. I think when I started out, you still had this last century thinking where knowledge is power and people contain power. My approach to that is actually opposite. I'm very into empowering and sharing as much knowledge as I can. So when I was coaching the millennials, I said, well, I wish someone had told me this early on in my career, and I just shared as much as I possibly could. And I think it's always that success is always about giving back and seeing other people be successful. So that has really been a driving force and inspiration for me in my life, seeing others be successful. I think that's one of the key things, is that when you do leave the world, that you leave the world a better place as much as you possibly can.
What a beautiful way of putting it. When you leave the world, leaving the world a better place. And I love how you again tied in the evolving and your life journey and your life history. So, success was around being successful with some worldly things around the businesses and work that you were doing, and then it's been success around the family and around the charities and the not-for-profit work that you do. But I really hear that theme throughout of giving back and getting that enjoyment and that sense of success by giving to others and giving to other organisations, so that their success is what then drives you to do more in your success in your life. And it's very beautiful. And thank you. I feel quite privileged to hear it put so beautifully and so eloquently and so humbly as well. I think it's really important to notice, how humbly you're sharing that incredible depth of knowledge that you're sharing through the mentoring now, the expertise that you bring in the not-for-profit space, and of course the joy and the approach to everything that you do. I think it's very beautiful, and I really commend you on all of that work.
I think it's really important too. Like when I was doing my first role at IBM, I was managing about $1 billion per annum revenue and sort of P&L in the region. And I've always believed also that you're successful when you see those around you be successful. So I several times I've joined organisations as a leader, and I thought there's this untapped potential of people who've been sitting in an organisation for 5 or 10 and IBM 20 years, and they just hadn't been promoted either. And I remember having those humble conversations with them saying, you're actually better at your job than I am. I'm the new MD for arguments. And a couple of them were statesmen in the companies, but they'd never been promoted. So I also think about stop and take pause and walk in others' shoes. It's easy to say it, but what's their experience been in their company or their role? And what's going to elevate them as an individual to be successful? Because everyone views success differently. For some people, it's to be acknowledged. For some people, it might be to use the title to go out and be more successful because it gives them a platform for them to be empowered and to do more. Or what are the things holding them back? So sometimes it's walking with someone, holding their hand, getting them through a sales deal and getting that first, wow, I can close $1 million deal, or I can deliver a successful transformation project. Having a cheer squad or someone with them, behind them, supporting them. Contemporarily, again, we call that also focusing on our employees. And when I talked about it, didn't exist in those days, customer centricity. Making those things the core of what you do, essentially, I think builds that platform for success. Because on the other hand, the yin and the yang, I have to, of course, be very pragmatic in business. And sometimes those decisions are really challenging at every level, but you have to be able to be very pragmatic for your clients and for the businesses that you run. And I think it's when you build those platforms of trust, when you have what I call every project has the good, the bad and the ugly, and you hit those walls, you've got a foundation of trust to work from. I think that's what is quintessentially the important part, that human connectedness and building that trust.
I couldn't agree more. It's so much about building that trust and understanding how that trust impacts on what you're doing and who you're doing it with. And I think, keeping that in mind as you're working and as you're working and building teams or leading yourself as well. We talk a lot with some of my clients about the self-trust. So we go through like micro steps, ways of building self-trust is to actually show that you can trust yourself to follow through on your agreements with yourself. I agree not to eat biscuits today, or whatever it might be, or I agree to go for a walk at lunchtime and not eat lunch at my desk. Whatever those little agreements are, the more that you kind of practice them, the more you train yourself to believe that you'll keep your agreements with yourself. And that then translates into keeping the agreements with others outside of you. These are really great tips. And I think given your expertise and technology background, ranging right the way through from entrepreneurial through to some of the big names like SAP, you have such an incredible and a unique insight into people's biases and people's barriers in many ways to what they're doing. And I think that self-belief that you are so beautifully modeling now is something that I'd love to hear. How can people build more of that self-belief for themselves?
I tend to be quite goal-oriented or have a vision, and then how do you marry that? So a lot of people talk about vision or a strategy, but they're not very good at marrying that together and executing. So for me, it's having that yin and yang, that balance, and being able to do both of those things, because that's what's critical in a career context, or as you touch on in personal life as well. To answer that question, I think it's always for me been, how do I grow? What can I do better? So you have touched on weaknesses before, and one of mine is not suffering fools. And so I kind of learned very early on that you see people who just do their undergraduate degree or do a certain number of things and then they rest on their laurels. And they stay that way for 10 or 20 years in their career. They don't really push themselves. To me, I've always loved learning, so that made it a little bit easier. I've done so many different courses to challenge and grow. And I think it's also, again, being pragmatic. If you realise you don't know something, you don't have to be the expert. Go to the subject matter expert or promote someone in your business that has that skill set. So, again, look outside yourself. Even when I did one of my companies early on in .com, everyone in my company was twice my age. Quite, be willing to say it's okay to surround yourself with people better than yourself. I think that's a great thing as well. So I think also when I touch on just not sitting on your laurels, it's innovate your way out of a problem. Either you're going to let yourself be overwhelmed by a problem, or what can I do to innovate myself out of that problem? And, for example, at SAP, when I was given Asia Pacific, Japan to manage, I challenged myself. Of course, I had visited these countries and worked in the region for many years, but then owning them as a regional leader, I challenged myself to go and polish up my tie. I challenged myself to learn Japanese and Hindi, at least to be able to be thoughtful and gracious as a statesman, that when you do a greeting in those meetings in the first 5 minutes, you are able to talk in their language and again, elevate myself at that point in my career from being a trusted advisor to more of a statesman or a stateswoman. And, I loved doing that. I had sari made for some of my meetings in India. And it was just such a joyful moment that you don't expect, that when you turn up, instead of wearing, as I am today, a corporate suit, I was wearing sari. To see the response from those people, that there was such joy and such respect, those are the things I think that really elevate who and what you are, those thoughtful pieces. I think also, again, pushing yourself. I remember, again, in the IT industry, I had a vision that I wanted to be on boards one day. My dad had been a CEO and had done similar work. So, again, you're able to see around you those images or those people that give you that inspiration or aspiration. And I thought, how do I do that? So I joined the Australian IT Industry Association, and I served there for over a decade on committees and different boards and different initiatives that came up. And I was networking with the best of the best in the industry. So I got to look around and see what I liked and didn't like, what I thought was working for different leaders and what wasn't working. And of course, every time that I've done give back, it's actually a blessing that you end up learning so much more because it opens your mind. So, for any of the people that want to extend themselves maybe to boards, it's don't just say suddenly one day I wake up and I want to be on boards. You need to build those building blocks. I was training at elite level in equestrian, and there's a lovely lady at IBM who competed in more than 5 Olympics for the Australian team in marathon. And, there's pictures where if you don't see underneath, the building blocks are all the work underneath that lead to that success. So I think also it's having that mindset of knowing I'm going to have to put in some hard work here. I need to be pragmatic. And out of that comes success.
And
so
I'm really
just looking at the gold medal or the pretty thing or the title or whatever it is. It's just being pragmatic and realising, hey, I actually need to put in some hard work here. I need to believe in myself, and I need to surround myself with people that are inspirational, or they can be the opposite, because that gives you a lesson about what you don't want to be. We've all had bosses like that, and I can think of a few and say, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I don't want to be. Those are really valuable. Rather than being overwhelmed by that tide of negative energy, what can I learn to be a better leader when it's my turn as well?
And I think, you've covered such a wealth and so many wonderful insights there, and my brain's kind of going, oh, wow, there's so many fabulous, and, the thing that I hear again as you're speaking is that you're not just saying things that you've experienced and you've lived through and used. And when I was asking about self-belief, I think that, you covered a lot, but it was also those were the life experiences and the work experiences that have led you to keep building on that self-belief. So that sense of curiosity and keeping learning.
Yeah, and of course for kids today, they call it action-based learning.
Yeah.
Go out and do it. Like, it doesn't cost you anything to pick your peak body in the industry that you're in and go and do some of those things. All it costs you is some time and some thoughtfulness and some energy. But if you want to grow, you've got to push yourself to do it.
That's where the that sense of self-belief actually comes from, is very much around the whole you're believing it because you're actually doing it. And like you were saying at the end there with the beautiful example around the equestrian gold medals, etc. The medals and everything are like the outcome of many, many years and many building blocks around building that. So I think in terms of self-belief and in terms of your wonderful examples and tools that you're sharing with people, just getting out there and starting something in the area that you're interested in and surrounding yourself with, I love that around having other people that, have been there and have done that. And so you can see that there is a pathway, and then surrounding yourself, you mentioned it for the IT group, that, once you were there, you could actually be around some of the thought leaders. And then they do say, you're the sum total of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So if you're surrounded by the industry leaders, then you by default become an industry leader, because that's how you're thinking and talking. So these are...
I don't know if it's a default. I think it just uplifts you and it helps you open your mindset to what's possible or what is happening, particularly in the IT industry, because it's very dynamic and it's moving. It changes every year. So you can't leave yourself behind with technology. You have to stay current with technology. But yes, certainly what you're saying does resonate. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess default or what I'm thinking is I was speaking to somebody the other day about how many people don't think that they can write a book. And then suddenly if in the group where everybody writes a book, it becomes the norm. So what I meant by default was, if you're an IT industry group like you're describing, where everybody's keeping up to date on the latest technology, then the norm becomes you're keeping up to date on the technology.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're outside of that group, being as engaged and excited and geekish about technology may not be that, people might look at you like, oh, what do you mean? And how can you be doing that? But these are all great tips. And I think the other thing that I really pick up on is that you walk both within that entrepreneur space as well as, and from the .com stage right the way through to having your own businesses, as well as working in that corporate space. And many people and many women I know as well might be looking and going, well, I really want to do a lot of these things, but I don't quite have that self-belief. And how does she kind of walk into places and get this energy and joy and enthusiasm and confidence from? What sort of suggestions or tips would you give people like that might be a little bit more hesitant?
Yeah, sure. So perhaps it's get a champion. So you talked about, I've got a girlfriend who's talking about writing a book, so it just triggered my mind. And sort of I've been trying to champion her to start. Perhaps it's find a champion. And I was asked to do a executive review of Peter Strokoff's book on marketing, which was smart marketing. So finding people with a like mindset, if that's possible. If you can't find those people in the COVID landscape, it is harder. Perhaps join your industry peak body, because again, that will give you a network of people who are already probably more outgoing and ready to greet you with open arms. So it's not a difficult place to start. That perhaps would give people the confidence to network with like-minded people. If not, there's a lovely space, obviously, in the not-for-profit sector. Hone your skills perhaps and do some what we call give back, obviously, because you are picking up skills there, perhaps around networking, perhaps it's running a profitable business. it's doing fundraising, it might be doing marketing. So there's lots of different facets in that sector as well. One of the boards I sit on is the Australian Regenerative Medicine Institute, which is just an incredible group of scientists doing incredible research in Australia. So just having a conversation with those scientists, even though I happen to be sitting on the board, every time I talk to them, I'm so inspired by what they're doing. It's just they're studying strokes, they're studying hearts, they're studying birth defects and unborn babies. How can we use technology to halve that research time? I think when you take yourself outside of yourself and you start to involve yourself with others, you would naturally find yourself wanting to help them or wanting to learn more. And again, you're working with inspirational people. So perhaps for people that aren't as comfortable, a little bit more introvert, it's finding those people that are more like-minded to them, or whether they're willing to not go with the like-minded route, and just challenge yourself to find different people in your industry sector that will challenge your mindset. And they might take you down a different path, and that's okay, because we all need to have those life experiences that say this is what I like and what I don't like. So it will hone your skills personally. And even just talking to them about what they read, what they like, it can be coffee, it doesn't all have to be business, it can be developing those deeper relationships. And it takes you on that journey, I think, to explore who and what you are. And if you can be centered in yourself, that gives you a really solid place to go out into the world and be successful. I think, we would say that getting your own in-house self happy and successful. I also like Deepak Chopra. He talks about synchronicity and resonating in a certain wavelength of energy. And that would give you a place to meet like-minded people, is what we'd say.
Fabulous. I love all of these different suggestions that you've been making and how it really resonates with me as well. And one of the things that was interesting even in preparing for today is that Sonya and I just met quite recently, but I was actually at the book launch because I know Peter Strokrod quite well. So we may have even crossed paths previously from different instances without really actually having met before. So I think once you start to resonate and you're resonating in those groups and volunteering to get some of that experience and some of the other suggestions that she's been making, I think that that's so quite useful to actually keep shifting and growing and to build that self-belief. So if people are wanting to get hold of you, Sonya, what would be the best way to get hold and to maybe speak with you some more about some of the suggestions that you've been making?
Well, obviously via your good self, Michelle, or please feel welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think it's a really great platform for networking, and I'm happy for people to reach out to me. It's Sonya Walker 1.
Sonya Walker 1, so there's a 1 after your name.
Yes.
Fabulous. And if you were to give some advice and some suggestions perhaps to a younger version of yourself, what might that be?
It's probably coming out in the chat today, but I think it's believe in yourself. Very much so about believing in yourself. It is great to surround yourself with other people, but the core piece is resonating at a high wavelength of energy, surrounding yourself with positive energy and people that care about you, and really believing in yourself and just having a go. I mean, there are times where I think it's a bit of an analogy in the IT industry. It's a bit like being a Hollywood actress, or if you're going for the Olympics or whatever your dream is, you're going to get lots of knockbacks, and those knockbacks, are one step closer to success. And that's okay. Don't be scared of those knockbacks. Don't be scared of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Those challenges will make you a better person, and just really believe in yourself and believe in others.
And that, I think that's where it's beautifully, you spoke so beautifully today about your belief in others, supporting others, and then obviously people that have believed in you, that have supported you over the years, and that reciprocity that creates that energy that you're talking about there with Deepak, and that wonderful momentum through that energy and through life that leads to all of the incredible learning and growth and opportunities that you so eloquently have shared with us today. So thank you so much for being on the show today, Sonya.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Michelle. And I just say to everyone, believe in yourself and go out into the world and be fantastic.
Wonderful. And what a great sentiment to finish up the show on. And to all the different viewers out there, I hope that you've again enjoyed all the different tips and tools and suggestions that we've shared with you today for creating and building your own mindset for success. But for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.